YvetteErasmus.com. And she's just one of our favorites. So help me welcome back Dr. Yvette Erasmus.
Thank you, Jay. I love starting my morning hearing words like authenticity and vulnerability and getting out of our heads and into our hearts. And I always just feel like my whole nervous system begins settling. I'm like, oh, I am in the right place. This is a very good alignment, very, very good alignment. So thank you very much for having me back. Thank you very much for those of you who decided to come out of your warm beds and the beautiful sunshine and join us here this morning. It's lovely to see you. It's lovely to see people coming back together again live. I've missed it. So yeah, I'm enjoying that. I still see all my clients through Zoom, but I'm doing all these speaking things. And I'm like, oh, I miss people. Like, there's something very different about being with other bodies in a room, you know? So I'm feeling really happy and delighted to be with you this morning. I get the pleasure of kicking off your April theme of going with the flow. So we're going to be talking about going with the flow. And I was thinking a little bit like, I don't know if you've noticed the news recently, but it's increasingly challenging for me to feel like going with the flow. You know, that takes a bit more practice, because what I'm finding myself in a lot more often is resistance. Right? I hear something, I see something, my system braces, my nervous system activates, and I'm like, no. And I'm finding much more no's coming up in me in response to some of the things that I'm hearing about, seeing, some of the things that are happening in the world that are not in alignment with what I would like in the world. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about how we might use this practice of going with the flow to co-create the world that we actually want. And what we do when we are faced with things that are arising inside of ourselves that we are not at peace with, and things that are happening outside of ourselves that we don't want to enable and that we're also not at peace with. So how do we hold some of these tensions, right? So let's start by talking a little bit about what we are going to mean today. We're just going to define going with the flow for us in this discussion for the next 45 minutes. Just for this. You can have whatever definitions you want outside of now. But going with the flow today is going to be, I'm going to use it to talk about having a mindset of a non-violent mindset. Many of you know that's always my jam, right? Nonviolence, peacemaking. So it's a nonviolent mindset in which we learn how to work with ourselves, how we learn how to work with others, and with the world as it is. So it is the essence of a going with the flow practice for me is about really understanding where our power lies and how to use our power effectively so that we're not recreating systems of domination which lead to fragmentation, suffering, and war. So what does it mean and how do we use this? So I'm going to talk a little bit about what going with the flow is not, because I hear it used defensively a lot. Do you know what I mean? When people say, oh, just go with the flow. Just go with the flow, which can mean go back into denial, dismiss the importance of what's happening, put your head in the sand, submit, comply, succumb to groupthink, right? This is not what we mean today when we're going to talk about going with the flow. We're not talking about minimizing the important things that need to be addressed and changed. We're not talking about sweeping things under the rug. We're not talking about being enabling and codependent and just saying, oh, it's all just fine, just go with the flow. So I want to just name that, because I hear this phrase being used to sort of justify, I don't have to do anything about anything, and I'm going to sink into apathy. And I'd like you all to do the same so that I don't feel guilty about my stance, right? Resonate with some of this, you've heard this. Okay, so that's not what we're going to talk about. We will talk about how you go with the flow with the people who are doing that, though. Okay? We will talk about how not to judge the people who are doing that and how you're going to work with them creatively. We will talk about that. Because at our essence, the thing that we have power over and the thing that where we do begin to harness personal power is by taking 100% responsibility for who we are going to be in the face of everything that is happening inside of us and outside of us. And that's the invitation that I have for you this morning, is to begin thinking about, who do you want to be? Who are you in the face of global war, climate change, the destruction of the habitats around us, the increasing polarization in the political fields, the increasing fragmentation among nations, the increase in violence against the earth, against other people, against identity groups, against nations? Who will you be in these times? And how might you use the principle of going with the flow to be an active co-creator? So that's where we're going today. For those of you who don't know me or haven't met me before, and also for those of you who have, the reminder, raise your hand if you have a question or comment at any time. I welcome being interrupted. I welcome being in conversation with people. If I say anything and you have a question about it and you'd like me to follow up with anything, just feel free to interrupt me. Conversation is much more enjoyable to me than, speaking for 45 minutes uninterrupted, which is also a great joy and very easy for me to do. But conversation is always an upgrade. So there's that. Okay. So the single most power. Power with, not power over, not power under. Okay, not dominating, not submitting, but maintaining a place of deep presence and connectedness with yourself, an alignment with your values, deep sense of who you want to be, and then a willingness. Going with the flow is a mindset that we adopt. And it is a playful, relational, improvising mindset. It is about going through your day with the practice of deciding that I'm not going to see my day, I'm not going to see the things that are happening in my day through the lens of wrongness. So one of the things we start giving up is our addiction to seeing everything through the lens of right or wrong. Okay, we develop a willingness to put that aside. Not that there's something wrong with right and wrong thinking, but it's not the tool we're going to use here. Okay, so we're going to contain it. We use it for other things, like math problems, engineering problems. Okay, that's where we use right-wrong thinking. We don't use it for systems change in human relationships. We need a different kind of thinking. And so the thinking we're going to adopt is, what is needed now? What is needed now? And we develop in ourselves a deep willingness to adapt, to flex, and to flow. Okay, going with the flow. And often when we start approaching concepts like this, there's an invitation for you to do some personal examination of your assumptions of what kind of universe we live in. Because it's going to be much easier for you to go with the flow if you have an assumption that we live in a universe that is inherently loving and good and filled with light, and that there is an intelligent life force energy that we're embedded in. When you have those assumptions, when you have that experience, and you live from that place, you realize that you are a vehicle to allow this intelligence and this energy and this love and this light to move through you and to be amplified through you to whomever and with whomever you are interacting. Now, I'm not here to tell you anything about what your spiritual path is or what your spiritual journey is. I'm going to share with you mine, and I'm just going to give back to you. I absolutely honor that you can make whatever choices and whatever makes most sense to you. I'll tell you how it works in me, with the assumption that there's probably many ways of this working for many different kinds of people, okay? But for me, it is very, very easy to go with the flow when I'm remembering that everything that arises is for me to learn how to love. It's all practice. And if the only thing that I need to do in my day is get deeply attuned to myself, not dismissing myself, not dishonoring myself, not overriding myself, learning how to work with myself, and then when I greet any one of you, my job is to learn how to be with you in a way that works with you as you are. Then it doesn't really matter what starts happening. The coffee spills on the ground. Oh, we're going to laugh about that because it's not about the coffee. It's about the experience of being together. It's about the joy of getting to clean something up. Which I, by the way, am one of those strange people that actually finds great enjoyment in organizing and cleaning. So, any others? I see there's at least one other person here who gets that particular form of mental illness. Yes. That's me, not you. No, I find it very soothing. I will often grab a drawer and unpack it and rearrange it, and then I'll feel this satisfaction. And it's just lovely. So why not approach everything that happens in my life, every mess that happens, as yet another opportunity for joy? Another opportunity for me to respond with willingness, with goodwill, with love. And if I'm asking, well, okay, what's needed here? It puts me in a very different mind frame than, what went wrong and who did this and why did they do this and who's to blame and what shouldn't have happened. So the kinds of thinking that's going to get you out of flow, and for me, out of flow is also into suffering, okay? So when we're out of flow, we're moving into suffering. Shoulds. Every single time you use a thought form with a should, you're out of flow. Yeah? And what you're doing is you're projecting your personal preferences onto everybody else. And then what will happen is, you all should be sitting 6 seats apart. Now, if I'm really attached to this idea, I'm going to be up here suffering, right? Because I'm going to be thinking about what is wrong with these people. What is wrong with these people, and why are they sitting so close, and haven't they, blah, 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 blah. And I'm going to have this thought form that I think I'm not going to be okay until I've imposed it upon all of you. I'm not going to be okay until all of you do what I think you should do. And then what's it going to be like interacting with me? Enjoyable? Are you going to feel loved by my deep intention to change and mold all of you into my image of how the world should be? No. What am I going to generate in my life? Oodles and oodles of resentment and resistance. And then I'm going to get so confused because I'm going to be like, why are people so defensive? What is wrong with these people? Right? And then I'm going to spend a lot of time trying to figure out what is wrong with you. And then when I have figured it out, you know what I'm going to want to do? Tell you. And then when I tell you, what are you supposed to say? Thank you. Right? And how many people say thank you? Oh, Yvette, that's so helpful. I'm so glad you figured out what was wrong with me. You just saved me a lot of therapy time. It's so much more efficient and much cheaper when you just come along and you let me know what's wrong with me. And I'm so grateful to you for your insights. I will now go and change myself. Like, who says that? No one. No one. So this whole thing of getting out of flow, when we start micromanaging the world and we start micromanaging other people and we start thinking through this frame of should, you should be different, you should be doing this, people should be doing that, I should be doing this. This is so out of flow and into human suffering. Very simple thing, you change your should into a could. It could be like this. One thing I could do. Now we're in the realm of possibilities. And people like possibilities. Possibilities give us a little bit of a way to get to more choices. And you know, one thing I know about people, myself included, is that we like our freedom. We like to be sovereign in our lives. We like to have choices. We want to have the freedom to be who we want to be the authority on who we are, and for other people to work with us as we are. Does anybody here relate with that? Do you want that? Is that, yeah? I mean, and the magical thing that happens when we are in flow with ourselves and other people is that people begin changing. When we are in loving and connected, heart-opened relationship with one another, we want to change. And we are changing for our own reasons. Because we start seeing, I may start seeing how something that I didn't realize before is actually impacting someone in a somewhat negative way. And I care about them. And when I care about them, and I don't lose connection to me, then my motivation for change is very loving and intrinsic and enjoyable. And I experience that kind of change as an upgrade to who I am, not a masking of who I am in order to make you happy. Does that make sense? Okay. So a few practices. Let's talk a little bit about practices of like rolling with others and rolling with life, because it is challenging, because if you have noticed, people suck. There's a lot of really crappy people out there, right? I would include myself in that group. No grandiosity here. I know that many people would say that about me too. But they kind of do, because they're very, very different. And they don't always do the things you think they should be doing, and they don't always meet your needs in the way that you'd like them met. And then not only that, they'll often do things that are unexpected. And then when they do these unexpected and surprising things, like not following through on an agreement or speaking to you in a way that you do not prefer, you know, we have a little bit of a dilemma. Like, how am I supposed to love that? How am I supposed to go with that flow? Like, I don't like that. I also need to protect myself, right? Okay. So I'm going to give you a few practices. I'm going to give you a few tools, some ways of playing with that. We're going to reframe every question. We've talked about this already. From what is wrong to what is needed. What is needed? And you're going to stay very, very much in the present moment. When we're in the flow, when we're going with the flow, we want to be very, very grounded in what is arising in the now. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little metaphor, imagining that you are on a surfboard surfing a wave. Okay, so when you're surfing, how many of you have surfed? Anybody in here surfer? Can you imagine it, please? Thank you. Okay, a few people. The rest of you, we will work on creative visualization. I think you can imagine what it might be like to stand on some moving thing, on another moving thing that is always slipping out from under your feet, okay? It's kind of like that. And then you crash into the water very, very often. And then you realize you don't actually have the core strength that you need to ever stand up on this thing, and why are you ever bothering? Okay? And then you realize there's a lot of muscle building and a lot of balance and a lot of training, and do you really want to do this? Right? And then eventually it's super exhilarating when you can stand on that damn thing for exactly 2 seconds before you crash. And then you're like, okay, from 2 seconds to 5 seconds. Okay, and then you learn how to fall, and I mean, it's very exciting. But eventually, when you've learned how to do it, it's exhilarating, right? It is exhilarating to maintain that kind of core strength and deep attunement to the moment to learn how to surf a wave. And that's very much what we are being asked to do psychologically, emotionally, mentally, psychically, in the world that we're living in. Our waves have been upgraded. And the waves that you were surfing, and perhaps were used to surfing, are bigger, and they're crashing harder, and they're going to require more. And there's not going to be any juice in raging at the wave. Let's not spend any energy railing against what's coming. Instead, we get our attention on what capacities do I need to develop so that I can trust myself to field what's coming. And can I field what's coming without succumbing to fear and violence and judgment and criticism, fragmentation, polarization, and the increase of human suffering? Can I field what's suffering in a way that my responses, which is the only thing that I have any control over, are my responses to everything that I don't like going to bring more love into the world, more compassion into the world, more presence into the world, more kindness? Or am I going to get so hijacked by my fears that I also become violent? It's a big question. Because the more afraid people become, the more selfish and violent people become when they are not conscious. And becoming conscious of this now and setting a very, very clear intention is critical for where we're headed. It's absolutely critical. And it's not a small task anymore. It's not easy. Because the things that we will be fielding are intense. They're intense. I mean, we're in a time of incredible transition and shift and change and revolution. And so in times of revolution, we want to go with the flow of a revolution. If in any one of our spirits we're like, no, I don't want to do the revolution, this is terrible, you're going to waste a lot of energy, and it's coming. It's not a good use of where we put our attention, because we do not control that. We're in it. Here's what we do control. Our attention, what we're attending to, our intention, our groundedness with our values, and how we respond to every moment of our day. That's where we flow with what is arising. Okay, so we go from what is needed, where am I now? We have a playful, yes, I'm going to take your question. I love questions.
Yeah, my question is, Charlie, I'm just going to get you on the mic so it shows up on YouTube. Because your questions are good.
Yeah, the question is mostly responding to you saying you have control over basically yourself in the own moment.
Yep.
But let's say, there's always circumstances that not necessarily justify, but let's say there's something where you don't have the moment to intellectually process it. Like, let's say you automatically act on instinct, like you get mad or you get sad, like some overwhelming sense of emotion. What would be the key to de-escalating? Because in that point you're already in emotion mind. So how would you?
Yeah, so the question being when something happens and my nervous system activates and hijacks me, and then I'm reacting with a defensive response, it might be a fight response of fighting back, or I freeze up and I'm totally hijacked. How do I go with that? Okay, that's a beautiful question. So most of what we do every day is unconscious. We're on autopilot and we're unconsciously behaving. And then every now and then, for a group like this, it's much more often than other groups, okay? Much more often. You will have a moment of awareness where you're like, oh, that was really unkind, or that was really reactive. There will be a moment where you become aware of this thing that just happened. You see it. You're not caught up in it. So first, you're not going to be able to do anything about it when you're caught in that moment and you're being hijacked because you're not conscious in that moment. There will be a moment where you become conscious of the thing you just did. Step one, love yourself up. Okay, the biggest mistake people make when they catch themselves doing something they don't like, or that there is not in alignment with who they want to be, is they judge it. Okay, judging it is not being in flow. That's not going with the flow. Going with the flow here would be, oh, yeah, that's my fighter. That's my little warrior spirit. That's my little destroyer who came out. She was really ready to annihilate you. Sorry about that. Yeah, I love her. I don't really want her running my life. She hijacked for a moment. I'm going to work with her. Yeah? And you're going to bring as much love and compassion and acceptance as you can to that aspect of yourself. Because this aspect of yourself that you're talking about, the part that gets mad and attacks, that lives in every single one of us. There is not a person in this room that doesn't have that part. We all have that. Here's the upside of that part. It's protective. It's protective. The reason you're getting hijacked is that your system perceives danger and it wants to protect a vulnerable part of you. And an unconscious way of self-protection is to aggress against another person. So that's going to happen when you are still in an unconscious default human state. That is the unconscious default human. Now we need to learn how to love that part up in ourselves, and then we learn how to love it in other people. Because when I'm not afraid of it in me, I will have more resourcefulness when it comes up in you. But if I'm scared of it in me, and I judge it in me, I will be more scared of it in you, and I will judge it even more harshly in you. And then I will think that my safety comes from changing you. Have you been in those relationships? Okay. Your safety does not come from changing them. Your safety comes from loving them. Now, again, it gets complicated, and if someone has a follow-up question, I'm happy to take it, because loving them does not mean enabling them. And it doesn't mean making yourself available for violence, and it doesn't mean saying, oh, it's okay if you cut me to pieces with your words. I can take it. That is not what I'm talking about. Okay? So we become aware. In the moment of awareness, we have choice. You don't have choice over whatever you're not aware of. And so when you find yourself behaving out of unawareness, and you become aware of your unawareness, your first task is to learn to love up your unawareness. That's how you work with it. That's how you flow with it. And let me tell you why. I'm going to give you a little bit more about why that's so important. Because one of the biggest problems as I see it on the planet is that most people are still asleep and they are unconscious. They are not aware, they are asleep, they are unconscious, they are reacting out of primal instinct, they are fear-based. And the process of evolving and growing up is about learning to become more conscious, aware, awake, alive, and self-responsible. And we cannot be self-responsible unless we're self-aware. And with self-awareness comes self-connection. Now, if I carry a lot of fear and I carry a lot of judgment, and I begin looking at myself, and I begin finding things that I don't like, then the biggest fear that I come across in humans is that they're afraid of the shame that they will feel. And they do not want to feel the shame, rightly so. Who wants to feel shame? Okay? We don't want to feel the shame. And so we don't want to wake up. We want to be comfortable. Yes. Yes, Charlie.
Follow up on top of this one. So the one would be, so I understand like you're analyzing emotions as, let's say, perceived as little people or something like that, and you're loving them for their aspects or some form of protectionism. Like let's say with black and white thinking, polarized thinking, not
Okay.
polarized thinking, but what would you do if like it's, let's say, a negative trait, like let's say greed or like envy or let's say insecurity, something like that. Mm-hmm. What emotional state would you turn on something that we already perceive as negative? Would you love a negative trait?
Every single thing that a human being ever does, every single thing you've ever done, has been your best attempt to meet a deep, universal human need that you have. Every behavior, every action, every inaction, everything you say, everything you don't say, is your best attempt in that moment to meet a deep need that you have. The strategies that we are trying to use to meet those needs are absorbed through childhood and ineffective. They have created fragmentation and violence, the increase of fragmentation and violence and greed on our planet. And they're ineffective partly because we're not aware of it. We think it's who we are. A lot of people think that's who I am. So the first step, when I'm working with somebody, if I'm evaluating them as greedy, then I look at what they're doing. What are the behaviors? They took all the cookies. And there's 6 of us sitting here, and you just grabbed the plate and wolfed them all down? Greedy little shit. Okay? Right? Some version of this? Okay. So if we're going to go with the flow, and we're not going to be in resistance, I'm going to be looking at that person through a different lens. I'm going to be looking at that person through, wow, I'm noticing, we're going to watch what's arising. This person is grabbing them. I wonder what they're feeling. I wonder if they're feeling hungry. I wonder if they're feeling insecure. I wonder if they're feeling vulnerable. I wonder if there's anxiety happening here. I wonder if they're feeling delight. I'm wondering if they're feeling enthusiasm. And then I'm going to figure out what might they be needing. Are they really needing fuel? Is this person malnourished? Are they needing significance? They never get cookies. I'm coming. They never get cookies. And now they're going to grab as many as they can because they don't trust. Maybe they don't trust that anyone shares. It's in their family, the very first thing, the first person to grab the plate gets them. What's happening? So going with the flow means greeting this person with curiosity and love and playfulness. And now I start asking a different question. I want to know what's driving this behavior. I want to care about what this person is caring about. I want to understand the context. I want to understand the story. I want to understand the history. And then I also want to let them know what happens in me in response to this thing. I feel a little sadness. I particularly like chocolate chip cookies, and I was wanting one also. Does this change anything for you knowing that? And now we're in a relationship. Now, if you grabbed a plate of cookies and I dealt with you that way, I asked you some questions, I let you know how it impacted me, is that going to be a different experience for you? Are you going to want to work with me, be with me, care for me too? Or would it be more effective for me to say, what the fuck are you doing? Sorry. What are you doing? We don't do that here in Minnesota. I don't know what country you come from. This is not appropriate behavior. It's greedy, it's selfish. Do you see what I mean? Okay, so that going with the flow piece is really, sorry you guys. Sometimes I forget where I am. So it's about working with people. Does that give you enough information on that beautiful example you're bringing in? Great. Yes.
This is more of like a comment than a question, but I've been reading this book. It's called What Happened to You?
Yes.
So the idea of, like in trauma, when someone's trying to help somebody,
yes,
don't ask them what's wrong with you, ask them what happened to you.
Absolutely. So that's a beautiful question for trauma healing and for healing work, is about understanding the context out of which somebody is emerging. Absolutely. What happened to you is a beautiful question. Yeah. Bruce Perry and Oprah, I think that's the book that they put together. It's a beautiful book. Yes.
What about when you're dealing with someone who takes obvious delight in other people suffering or power trips?
Yeah. Avoid them like the plague.
But what if you can't? Look at world leaders.
Yeah, so when we're working with people who do not have the desire nor the ability nor the desire, and we don't know which one it is very often because we're not living in the hearts of other people, but we can see from the outside that there's no willingness right now to change this. When people are harming other people, we gather a community and we exert the protective use of force. Okay? Now, our systems are not set up for that yet because our systems are set up for war making. And we have a huge gap in what we are needing. We do not have the systems, the training, the people together yet to do the protective use of force. Now, I'll say a couple things about the protective use of force, and then I'll take your question. So in the protective use of force, I'm going to make it really simple. You see two kids in a fist fight on the playground. You get a team of grown-ups, and you separate them, and you make sure that both people are safe. That's it. And then once they're both safe, you work in a compassionate and loving way with both people. And you go for reparation and healing and learning and growth. You don't go for punishment. And what we're very good at is the punitive use of force. And the punitive use of force increases violence. And it doesn't lead to healing, growth, or any meaningful movement forward, other than the only thing that the punitive use of force says is, if you have a bigger army, you win. But the actual act is the same. We all get to just hurt and force and kill and whatever, beat up on each other. And the game there is, we assume that that's the only way, and the game there is to be the strongest and the biggest, and the meanest and the horriblest. Now your question.
How about when the dynamics of power, what? Mm-hmm. Oh, how about when the dynamics of power, when you're dealing with people who are in a much more powerful position, or a person?
Yes. Give me a specific example, because that could be so many things.
Well, when you were talking about the way our systems are set up now, I worked at the courts for this state, and it was hugely disillusioning and damaging for me personally as well as other people. So I am working for someone who is a very high-level public official who is a bully.
Yes.
And the whole system is rigged for bullies to succeed if they're in power and have money.
Yes.
And so here I am, this little person, and how I needed to get out of there, but I didn't know it at the time. But how do you deal with that on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. It's a beautiful, beautiful question, and it's a very complex question. So I'm going to bring it back to the personal, because I'm going to say, how can I say this? In each of our lives, in your life, you had particular moments of interaction and relationship and access in which you could have an influence that was very specific to the power position you were in and the people that you were relating with. And that's all you ever have. That's all any of us ever have. And we get overwhelmed when we see layers and layers of injustice, and we notice that as one person, I don't have power in this context to change everything that I care about. And I can start seeing the ripple effect of violence and the way that it is institutionalized and legitimized. And in those moments, what I end up doing is getting very, very connected to the amount of overwhelm, sadness, and grief that wants to arise in those moments. And I allow my heart to stay open and for me to feel the impact and to learn about this position in this system and why it doesn't work for people, and to then figure out, as you did, is this a place, I stay in choicefulness, is this a place where I want to stay in this job because I can see ways that I might be able to affect change? Or is this a place that is actually going to be undoing to aspects of myself and detrimental to me, in which case I have a responsibility to remove myself from it and to take care of my needs without giving up on what I'm caring about. There will be other places in your life, maybe from the outside in, I've done this so many times myself where I've left a system and then I come back as a consultant. I'm like, I can't work in this. But you can pay me a lot of money to tell you what's wrong with it, which I do quite a lot of. So I find a way, in each of our lives, there will be choices that you need to make about where you're willing to participate in directness and where it's better for you to leave and either do it in another realm, do it with another group of people, build a community elsewhere. Sometimes We're not going to change something because it's so deeply entrenched over here, so we go over here and we build something new. And we build something new, and then everybody who's as miserable comes over here. So you change the game, and you start a new game, and they still want to go play, guns and robbers or whatever over here, and we're going to go play something really new over here, and as they see how much fun we're having, here they come. So you look at your life, you take care of yourself, you get really connected to your values, you get connected to your needs, you get very connected to the vision that you have for the kind of world you want to live in, and you put your energy there. And you choose your battles, You do not have to take on every bully out there, and you can feel the grief of it, and you can be like, if I'm called to work with that person, I will feel it. And when I'm not, I will feel that. Question in the back.
Just for the YouTube.
Hello, YouTube. So, question, isn't this failed system's root actually identification with the false self?
Oh,
or
I'm sorry,
idea
I
of
didn't hear that.
something we are not?
I didn't understand the question. Can you repeat
Okay,
that?
isn't this failed system that you're talking about?
Yes.
It's not working? Isn't its root actually identification with a false self? An idea of a false self that we think we are? Or an idea of something we're not?
That's a very valid theory. I don't know. You can certainly think of it that way. There's a lot of richness in this whole question of what is the authentic self and what is the false self. That will be another Sunday, I think. We can talk about false self and authentic self, because there's a part of me that very much is in the camp right now of there is no false self. I prefer thinking of it as you are all things. You have the capacity for all things. And it's not false. You are fearful. I am fearful. That's not a false self. That's your fearful self. And you are aggressive and violent, and so am I. And that also is your fearful self. Now, one of the ways that I disidentify, and I would recommend you disidentify, and I think this is why the language of a false self emerged, is that it's not my highest potential to live from my fearful self. That is not about reaching my highest potential. My highest potential is reaching for and stretching towards what expands my capacity to be loving and grounded and stable and firm in the face of pain and suffering and death. My most expanded self is willing to stay who she is, living from places that are aligned with my values. My fearful self doesn't. My fearful self is really after physical survival at all costs and comfort. That's what she wants. Yes. Sorry.
Okay, I'm thinking about like deception, like
Yes.
how, like when I'm in my expansive, well, I had an experience a month or so ago, and I'm in this very, I was actually coming from this place right here, and I was so expanded, and I felt so good, and I was, I don't know, I think I was deceived by someone. I was.
You were blindsided by
I was
something.
victimized, and I'm wondering, okay, so it's good to stay in this positive, wonderful self, but does that make you vulnerable to certain kinds of deception and abuse, that blindsided thing? And how do I reconcile that? So I'm trying to reconcile this experience without like being like suspicious of everybody, that I encounter, because that's, so there's got to be some kind of balance. I don't know.
Of course.
I'm rambling on. You
So
answer that.
This is another beautiful question. So then what I would say about going with the flow is, so I had an experience of deception and betrayal. That happened. Let me fully feel the impact of that. Let me feel the grief, the hurt, the burn, the amount of fear that is now in my system, the hypervigilance. It's about letting yourself feel it. You have permission to know what it's like when you are betrayed and blindsided and victimized. And those feelings are not a sign that something is wrong. Those feelings need to move through you like the weather so that you can release them. Otherwise, to the degree that we live in a culture where we contain them, we sit with that experience for longer. So, and I notice there's emotion coming up right now, and I would say welcome that in and let that move. That is about going with the flow. That is about allowing that experience to move through you so that it doesn't get stuck in you and it doesn't define you. And what I'm wishing for you and everyone else who has that experience is a community of loving people who sit with you in your tears, who sit with you in the grief, who sit with you in comfort and reassurance, and can be with you through these experiences that we have as human beings. Yeah. There's so much more I would love to tell you, and it's time for us to wrap up. And there is so much more conversation I would love to have with you, but I'm going to just leave you with these, just a few thoughts. I think what you're asking is such a gorgeous, and what you were asking and what you were bringing in, it's a gorgeous example of one of the things that prevents us from going with the flow is that we resist the pain of it. And one of the practices is learning how to hurt without turning on yourself and others, and without tightening up around the pain. When we can let pain move through us, it resolves much more quickly, and it keeps your heart open and strong. And when we tense up around life and around pain and around experience, we become more fearful and more brittle and more guarded and more constricted, and then we are suffering more than what that experience would have done had it just moved through. So I would invite you to find ways of just getting deeply present and allowing life to move through you, reminding yourself there's nothing wrong with me. I'm having an experience of being a human being in a planet full of suffering, and I will stay grounded in love and light, and I will remember that I am stronger, that I will survive this, that I will feel this, and I will use it to open me up, not close me down. And that's where you're going to find tremendous co-creativity and power. So thank you very much for having me here this morning. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Yvette. And great stuff, great content.
This is recorded on YouTube, so you can watch this again. There was a lot of really juicy stuff there. You may want to revisit this, so just go to YouTube in a couple days and look for this service. And as well as the rest of her content on YouTube, just search out Dr. Yvette Erasmus, or go to... It's right now. Oh, it's streaming live. Okay, beautiful. Okay, well now, what could serve us now would be a gratitude offering. Yay. So I just appreciate your generosity in helping support this amazing place. It's a vortex of energy and wonderful people, and we just need your support in keeping this oneness mission moving, because that's what heals us all. So thank you very much for your generosity.
Shifting waters of the river of this life, I was swimming, seeking comfort. I was wrestling ways to find a boulder I could cling to, a stone to hold me fast, where I let the fretful waters of this river round me pass. And so I found an anchor, a blessed resting place, a trusty rock I called my Savior. There I would be safe from the river and its dangers, and I proclaim my rock divine, and I pray to it protect me, and the rock replied, God is a river. home. God is a wild, raging rapids and a slow, meandering flow. God is a deep and narrow passage, a peaceful sandy shore. God is a river swimmer, so let go.
Okay, now if you could help me in blessing the offering, I invite you to raise your hands and repeat after me. Perfect love flowing through me blesses and multiplies all that I give, all that I receive, and all that I am. And thank you. And now, as our tradition, as a form of oneness, Dr. Yvette is going to lead us in a... We can go all the way around. Heck yes. It's about damn time. And a closing message.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm really enjoying it.
Oh, thank you.
Great.
Thank you. All right.
Okay. And I still have my...
Yeah. All right. I am going to leave you with a blessing by John O'Donohue because I love John O'Donohue. May you awaken to the mystery of being here and enter the quiet immensity of your own presence. May you have joy and peace in the temple of your senses. May you receive great encouragement when new frontiers beckon. May you respond to the call of your gift and find the courage to follow its path. May the flame of anger free you from falsity. May warmth of heart keep your presence aflame and anxiety never linger about you. May your outer dignity mirror an inner dignity of soul. May you take time to celebrate the quiet miracles that seek no attention. May you be consoled in the secret symmetry of your soul. May you experience each day as a sacred gift, woven around the heart of wonder. Have a wonderful week, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.